peer review and things like that. You know, Negation has submitted it to his friends, atheist friends, about 5 or 6, and one Christian, me, from the list under his video. And, you know, I think if it's going to be seen as proof, for even subjectively to a person, it has to be subjected to wider scrutiny and of wider community, etc. But this is a good start that Negation of Peace done. Second thing is on the resurrection. He talks about belief, and then he says you make up your mind. But then he says, but God's attributes, and he mentions 4 attributes. And I think he should make up his mind whether to let people think completely their beliefs, or whether he should leave that out and just put 4 comments of attributes of God. But because he's said 4 attributes of God, he's kind of leading people to think in a specific way, and that's not objective. And I think, you know, I think it's important that, you know, we have to come back to this objectivity as well if we're talking about action and how people's beliefs work out in action. And there's no room to talk to discuss specific beliefs, and I think we have to talk about objectivity in beliefs. And if you're talking about Christianity, we've got to talk about the resurrection of Christ and objective evidence for that. You know, the recent scholarship with Dr. Balcom, N.T. Wright, and people like that, the source material, the Gospels, what are they? Tacitus, Josephus, lots of things like the Gnostic Gospels, how do they relate to the Gospels? Dr. Price, Richard Carrier, people like that who are coming against people like Dr. Balcom, N.T. Wright, and lots of critical issues that come down to about objectivity, about history, relates to Christianity. And I don't think this video even begins to tackle that issue. And that's important in relation to how we act. Is it based on objectivity? Because someone could actually say, I am actually perfect. I perfectly do everything. So what are we going to do then? The only way we're going to deal with them is that we pin them down on objectivity. Is it objective truth that they have? What worries me with this video and a lot of atheist stuff and a lot about our Western culture is Jesus Christ had the most powerful influence in history. He influenced the East. Even Gandhi said he was the most perfect person he'd ever read about, thought about. H.G. Wells in the West said Jesus had influenced history like nobody else. Jesus has influenced the Galilean Jew, has influenced science, has influenced politics, has influenced literature in every department throughout history, socially. You know, thousands of hospitals, tens of thousands of hospitals have been started in his name, and we don't discuss about Christ in our Western culture enough. And I think as atheists that you need to address that. The next thing as well is recent research in neuroscience. Recent research in neuroscience has shown why people act the way they do. And you've got to understand the way the brain works. The brain processes information at the front, logically, and in the middle of the brain it processes emotionally. Now, when a person learns habits of practical habits in their life, if in the middle of the brain, it's the pain and pleasure together, working together. Now, if a person's in pain, it triggers pleasure, okay? So a person could say, for example, not masturbate in front of their family, okay? But when they are alone, if they're in pain in some way, and pain could be stress affects pleasure, depression affects pleasure, a whole variety of emotional difficult issues that people can go through triggers off pleasure. So what that means is if someone won't masturbate in front of their family, if they are alone, it will trigger off their past behaviour habits of masturbation. The pleasure process will come up. So they've got 5 seconds to choose whether they react to that. And so it has a powerful impact on how they will act alone. And, you know, So the recent research in neuroscience is extremely important in talking about this issue. And also, you know, I listened to some real, you know, some real deep philosophers. I think there's a guy called John McDowell. There's another guy, Bernard Williams. Massive deep philosophers, but you know, they're very sort of ethereal, the very airy-fairy technical stuff. But when you get into the practical daily life, you know, then things are more complex. And I think this video it's very logical, it's very precise, it's all very neat. But when you hit real life, if you're hit by a number of stimuli, difficult problems, I don't think you can narrow it down perfectly as good as we think we can. Having said that, the Bible actually agrees to some extent with what Negation of Peace trying to achieve. It's trying to show connection between action and beliefs. And the Bible talks a lot about, you know, your beliefs should match, your action should match your beliefs. It talks a lot about, you know, walk in the light, etc. So that's all I can remember from my notes so far. So thank you very much, and thanks to everybody.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is now that Jason has 5 minutes in which to formulate 2 questions, which Negation of P has 5 minutes to answer. Back to you, Jason.
The only thing I can think of Negation of P is 2 things. I think one is the Apostle Paul talks, all fall short of the glory of God. And Seneca says his lecture hall was a hospital. Does that have any bearing? Does those 2 thoughts, it's just one question really, do those 2 thoughts have any bearing on this video, to your mind?
The short answer is no, Jason, and the main reason is because I look at the Bible, and again, I'm not trying to be confrontational or being belittling in any way, but I see the Bible the same way as I see any other book. Like, let's say, I don't know, the Odyssey, Iliad, Homer, you know, across the board. There are truths that are in each book. But the problem is we don't take the Iliad and worship it and think that everything that, you know, any of the characters there did mandates that we follow something else. So even though Paul states we're all going to fall short, okay, I'll grant you, in fact, Jason, and kind of backing up a little bit into your 20-minute deal, you know, you were talking about we need to look at the validity of God and the historical, you know, all that as far as not only Jesus but the Bible and all that. Jason, for this this debate, I will absolutely grant you that all of that is real, and that you 100% what you believe is actuality. Now, when I come back to my question, I'll kind of go into that, but what I'm saying is that no, this question derived from a private conversation between me and Live Life in a real world action that it just was a light bulb moment. It came on and we discussed it, and from that point we started to develop this. Now that the thing about Paul and that statement is it's very, very all-encompassing. It's basically like saying that I will fall down before I die. I'm pretty sure that if I don't die within the next 5 minutes, there's a good chance that I'm going to trip and fall down. So an all-encompassing statement like that is, let's say, I don't want to say meaningless, but it definitely is not something that would have a predictive quality or be impressive in any way. So just because, you know, Paul states that, it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I hope that helped, and I hope that answered it. DPR?
Jason, this section allowed you 2 questions. We only had 1, and we have time remaining. I don't want to take that opportunity of asking a supplementary or second question.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. What about the Seneca quote? My my lecture hall is my hospital. Does that have any resonance with you for your video?
Really not, again, Jason. I think the problem that theists and atheists run into is that and again, I'm not trying to be, label all Christians or you in general or anybody else, but what I see is that it seems to me that most theists and most atheists, their main difference in coming to an argument or a belief is that the theist will base things on, at least in part, an argument from authority. Therefore, if someone that has a big name, a recognized figure, says something, it holds more weight than someone who doesn't. Whereas an atheist, it doesn't matter what the person's title is. Richard Feynman had a great quote on this. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically he said it didn't matter who you were with, what letters were behind your name. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And I think that is what atheists feel in general. At least I know that's how I think, is that I am going to run reality through the filter of what my logic, my reasoning, and my understanding of the facts are, regardless who says it. So to me, it's almost irrelevant who says it. It's either true or it's not. And if it's not, great. If it is, great. If my 7-year-old comes home tomorrow and tells me something that I didn't know before that's true, I'm going to take it just as much as if I heard it from Stephen Hawking. So I hope that helped.
Okay, shall we move on to the next section, which is negation of B, asking 2 questions to Jason. And again, the same 10-minute time limit applies.
Or do you want to do that, Jason? Or I didn't know when the 5-minute break was going to be. I don't care. I'm good to go whenever you are.
Yeah.
Did you want the break, or did you want me to go ahead and ask my questions?
No, go on. Yeah, ask your questions, bro.
Okay.
If that's okay.
All right. This has to do with objectivity, and it seems that you don't feel that my questions are objective. And I guess the problem I have with that is that beliefs, and the question I'm asking is, do you agree with this? Even though a belief may be, by definition, a subjective term, we can test for those beliefs. The example I will give is, I believe in a mysterious force. We do not understand this force in any way. My job is contingent on this force. And because of my belief that this force is real and exists, there are certain limitations that I impose on myself. Now, the force that I'm speaking with is gravity. When I'm in my aircraft, I do not step out of the door when it's off the ground. Now, there is no one who can tell you definitively what gravity is. We can see the reaction to it. But again, I don't know if those reactions are real. In fact, I don't even know if what we're doing now is real. We could all be a brain in a jar for argument's sake. And gravity is just part of the construct of the matrix, for lack of a better term. But I believe that. Therefore, I don't do as Neo did and walk off the side of a building. Now, again, I was a little disappointed because the 20 minutes that you had, you didn't address personally anything on the argument. You talked about everything except how it pertains to you. Now, just as I can look at how gravity affects my decisions, I'm trying to apply the same methodology to how your belief in God affects your actions. And I'm seeing a disconnect there. So could you explain that for us? That's all I had. Go ahead on that one.
Okay, bro. First of all, you talk about objectivity and as if Christians aren't interested in objectivity and names. You know, I talked about the resurrection of Christ, and